think all the available spectrum has been auctioned to the major telco owners.
Yes.
Which leaves very little space for a company like ours to be able to acquire spectrum.
Yeah.
We're bringing edge compute into the mine.
Okay.
We're bringing digital twinning technology into the mine. Nokia has deployed edge compute in Africa from Nokia and all of the applications that can enable. And we are very hopeful that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think you're maybe going to be one of the first organizations to bring digital twinning technology into mining in Africa. But Nokia with NASA is developing a wireless network that NASA will use, and it will be permanently on the moon.
This episode of ITWeb TV is brought to you in association with ITWeb Security Summit, the must-attend gathering of IT, security, and business decision makers. Visit itweb.co.za for more information. Welcome to another episode of ITWeb TV. Today we are going to be discussing the different technologies that the mining sector is making use of. And we are joined by Anton Fester, who is from a local company, Sedna, and Gary Conway from Nokia. Gary has traveled all the way from Dubai. Anton, we are going to start with you. If you can just tell us what Sedna is all about and maybe your partnership with Nokia, then we'll come to Gary after Anton.
I'm Nanjira Sambuli. I'm a tech policy researcher and one of the keynote speakers at the forthcoming ITWeb Security Summit. Catch me on 4th to 6th of June in Johannesburg, where I'll be exploring some fascinating topics like the role of cybersecurity in trustworthy African fintechs.
Thanks, Admire. Sedna is an industrial integrator where we look at enabling technologies. And one of the primary ways for us to be able to do that is using networks. And I think we're all aware of wireless technologies like Wi-Fi, but LTE and private LTE provides an opportunity for us to be able to deliver use cases which really are what the fourth industrial revolution is all about. We engaged with several OEMs, and what drew us to Nokia was not only the pace at which they were developing this technology, but it was certainly the wealth of deployments that they've done, and also their capacity and their presence within Africa. And for us, these were all very key ingredients which really helped start our relationship.
Thanks, Anton. Maybe to you, Gary, if you can just describe to us what your portfolio does. I know you have come all the way from Dubai to be joining us here. If you can just describe to us what your portfolio is about and your relationship with Sedna.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So what we've been doing in Nokia is realizing that the traditional hardware and software used in commercial public networks is very suitable for solutions in companies, for example, mining, where that connectivity has to be what we call mission business critical. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's got to be high grade hardware and software, very resilient, high availability, because the type of use cases that we're delivering over that network demand the highest level of service. As an example, errors or outages could be safety critical and most certainly be business critical. So the same type of well-tried and tested, highly available networks in the public networks. In Nokia, many years ago, we realized that type of reliability was needed in enterprise, specifically mining. We work predominantly a model where we have partners and system integrators that deliver the solutions we manufacture. And really what we look for is incredibly reliable partners that are willing to invest in their people to attain certification within our type of portfolio and solution, credible in the marketplace, and of course with industry experience. That's how Nokia and Sedna's path crossed a few years ago. We've got very successful deployments under our belt, and we do a lot of business development for future deployments. It was important for us to have an African entity delivering our solutions in Africa, and that's what we found with Anton and his business.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Gary. Back to you, Anton. You mentioned something about LTE connectivity, a private LTE that is. What are the benefits that these solutions are bringing to our South African companies? And maybe if you can also explain the adoption rate amongst South African minds about this technology.
Certainly, I think the easiest way for me to be able to illustrate the benefits of LTE is to compare it to something like Wi-Fi. So, because the LTE networks are deployed on licensed spectrum, as opposed to your home Wi-Fi, I'm sure if you open your phone at home and you look for available Wi-Fi networks, you'll probably see between 5 and 10 your neighbors around you, and that causes interference. With licensed spectrum, the LTE signal is propagated in a slice of spectrum that nobody else can use. So the key benefits are, A, you get less interference, but B, you're also able to broadcast it over much further distances. So the amount of infrastructure that you need is less. Security is a critical component of any network now. I think if we look at the amount of cyber attacks or malicious actors that could be present or would look to expose vulnerabilities on your network, LTE guards against this incredibly well, in the sense that you need a SIM card that's provisioned on the network to be able to access the network. So as opposed to me just sharing my Wi-Fi password with you and gaining access to the network, that is a physical security intervention. The ability for a device that operates on an LTE network to move from one radio to another radio is significantly better than on Wi-Fi. And in fact, I hope Gary will speak a little bit later to the first deployments, the first private LTE deployments in Australia, where you could see, I think it was up to an 80% reduction in the number of communication errors, which translated into a significant amount of enhanced uptime, which had a very real impact on the production numbers of the operation. And the third or the fourth point that I'd like to bring out is the number of connections that you can have per radio. In Wi-Fi, you're fairly limited. You can get between 30 and 100 connections, maybe, depending on the technology. And at that end, it really starts moving into the technology's red line. It struggles at that point. Whereas with LTE, you can have up to 800 simultaneous connections, and it just manages the traffic so much better. We had a phenomenal real-world example where we compared the amount of data that was required to stream an HD video over Wi-Fi, where we traditionally saw that being about 8 megabits a second, being reduced to between 2 and 3 megabits a second, simply because the technologies allows it for it to be transmitted more efficiently.
Thanks a lot, Anton. Over to you, Gary. Anton just mentioned that your first deployment was in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, and you are also coming from Dubai. I'm sure you're also involved in other regions, except for other than Dubai. If you can just maybe tell us the difference in the adoption rate of these technologies. Are African countries also adopting these technologies at the same rate as the Australian mines or those mines in Dubai, if they are mines?
I think it's a great question, and maybe just a little bit of clarity around my answer, because 2014 was the first commercial deployment of LTE in mining, and it was done by Rio Tinto. And it was because of a massive Wi-Fi failure on a mine site that drove to alternate technology selection. Rio and other organizations, you would class in the mining business as big tier ones, industry leaders, some of the biggest companies in the segment. So they were classed as early adopters. And I think there was a lot of benefit in having that, because if you look today, there's a very high take-up where you had the big tier one global organizations. So Australia, South America, North America, a very, very high take-up of 4 and 5G deployments in mining for servicing use cases. What I see as really encouraging is that Africa hasn't been left behind.
Okay.
So we're seeing in South Africa and Africa generally, both north and south of the continent, good take-up, healthy take-up of 4 and 5G infrastructure for use cases. They're not followers, but they've let the tier ones trial and test, and they're benefiting from that early adoption from the bigger organizations. The technology is tried and tested. It's been deployed since 2014, and deployments continue to grow. So we are seeing a take-up in Africa, and what's really encouraging for me is market research is showing that African companies are seeing a need for digitalization and technology investment. They know they have a technology decision to make, a digitalization decision to make in the next 2 to 5 years. So the message, I think, is well understood. The technology is well tested and referenced. So I from a personal perspective, I see an acceleration in adoption in South Africa.
Great stuff. Also, there's now talk of private 5G. I know we've been talking about private LTE. Should mines still invest in private LTE when there is maybe a supposed better technology like private 5G?
One of the reasons why we really like the Nokia solution at Maya is that many of the 5G capabilities to be able to migrate from 4G or LTE to 5G is a software change. So much of the infrastructure remains in place, which creates a fantastic digital pathway for you to be able to capitalize on the current capabilities of 4G, but ensuring that it is future ready. For me, 5G is always, or the ability to deploy 5G will always be spectrum dependent, and it'll be the mine's access to spectrum, because what 5G does very well is to compact or to actually optimize different spectrum ranges into one broader pipe, which allows you to move more data, which enables and other increased speeds that we would experience in a public or in a consumer dominated network versus a private network. So certainly I think as the use cases that are deployed also become more sophisticated and they require more data, that will also be a natural pathway to the deployment and to the adoption of 5G.
If I could add,
yeah, sure.
To Anton's answer, we're currently seeing most of the use cases, around 70 to 80% of the use cases that businesses are looking to implement can be delivered on 4G.
Okay.
We're also seeing a growing ecosystem of 5G devices, because any network is great, but you should also be able to connect and enable something for the customer that you're delivering to. And 5G devices are now at an enterprise price point. You're not paying a premium for a first to market for devices. So, both solutions are very suitable. Most use cases can be delivered on either. And as Anton mentioned, there's no need to wait for 5G. We can upgrade via software our solutions from 4G to 5G with minimal hardware changes. So it's very interesting. But yes, 70 to 80% of use cases are still deliverable on 4G.
Cool stuff. Just back to you, Anton. You mentioned spectrum. So do you get this spectrum from the telecoms regulator, ICASA?
In South Africa at the moment, I don't know. I'm sure many of you viewers are very media aware of what's happening in the spectrum space. But South Africa is a country on the continent where I think all the available spectrum has been auctioned to the major telco owners.
Yes.
Which leaves very little space for a company like ours to be able to acquire spectrum. So we do work with the telcos to be able to provision their spectrum in a very limited geography. What does count in our favor is that traditionally the mines are located in more rural areas, so
Yes.
there's less consumer demand, which I think allows the spectrum owners to be able to balance off and still be able to satisfy both demands. It's important to offer our population access to internet, but equally as a business enabler, it's critical that our mines and our organizations beyond mining, we're positioned not only in mining, but to deliver these services into heavy industries. So oil and gas is a market that we're very interested in pursuing. Energy, ports, manufacturing industries, where there are key use cases which revolve around productivity, efficiency, and as Gary mentioned previously, safety is a core tenet of what we would look to be able to provide these services to our customers.
Thanks, Anton. Speaking of safety, I understand some mines are now maybe making use of robots to go underground. Adoption of robotics and artificial intelligence, I'm sure, is growing within the mining sector. Maybe to you, Gary, if you can just the adoption rate as well of these robots in the mine, and how critical is connectivity for these robots that are getting into the mines?
So the connectivity for me is the foundation of the solution. It's not the be-all and end-all, it's the foundation. And then what we do with that connectivity really becomes interesting. So what do we see in adoption rates in smart new use cases? They're coming quite high. We're already seeing on the continent driverless vehicles. Now that doesn't mean job reductions. In Australia and in Africa, where we see automation, we see better results of the OEM's assets, working faster, working smarter, working safer. But what we also see on both sides of the world is that resources are redeployed. Having someone with all of the certification to be in an operational area is an asset to any mining company. And with natural churn, even with automation, we're not seeing job reductions. So that's fairly interesting. We're seeing also the ability to remotely control these heavy drills, vehicles, loaders. That is today active in African mines. There's some really smart applications, and maybe this is a wider subject, but things like monitoring people's faces for fatigue.
Okay.
So control rooms can advise people to take a break, have a rest, because of the pattern of their eyes can make a signal of potential fatigue. And we're also seeing some smart robotics for surveying, real-time surveying, image capture, entering into potentially unsafe area to check before you send in humans. All of these type of things are happening today in Africa. So it's a really exciting space. But applications is probably a great question for later. That's really exciting.
Awesome. And let's say you deploy maybe a private LTE network within a mine. We also understand that there are communities that actually rely on those mines. Do you also offer connectivity to the surrounding areas, or even for private use for the miners if they want to connect to that network to call maybe somebody, or it's just strictly for the mining activities?
Great question. I think we are seeing more and more. We're seeing more and more intent from the miners to understand that one of the licenses for them to operate is for them to ensure that the communities in which they operate, that they benefit from the mining operation. But to the exact question, it really depends on the miner. We certainly have one client who is very intent on sharing that connectivity that has been created with the community, and they've got a phenomenally exciting educational program which they're looking to deploy. So for me, that is something which I always find remarkable. These mines, as I mentioned earlier, are often located in incredibly remote areas, and in many instances, the mine is responsible for the heartbeat that provides blood into that community, and they do take this responsibility very seriously. And certainly connectivity and the provision of internet connectivity is a key value add which they can give those who share in the natural resources.
Awesome. Also, I know Gary, you just mentioned that jobs are not losses, are being not lost there because of the implementation of technology. But we know South Africa is a highly unionized environment, especially at the mines. Have you not faced any resistance of the miners saying, this technology, I'm going to lose my job, and you have to go and really educate them that, okay, you will create new roles and things like that?
Look, I haven't seen that resistance in Africa. I think we have a responsibility not only to enable but also to educate. And as I said, the trend that we've seen on our deployments has always resulted in added benefits to the investment, a safer work environment for the people on site. If we can automate an activity that is trending as a high-risk, accident-prone activity on that site, that's the benefit of everybody. Everybody's collective goal should be that a miner goes home to his family at the end of his shift. Now, unfortunately, that's not happening in Africa at the moment. The fatality rate is too high, one of the highest in the world, unfortunately. So I think the education of the benefits the network brings, open dialogue about the capabilities of the network, sharing the trends we've seen on people that have already deployed, should bring some comfort to unionized organizations, employers and employees. That's all I can do from Nokia's standpoint, is obviously share that knowledge that we have.
Great stuff. Back to you, Anton. Last time we spoke, you mentioned something about providing connectivity underground. If you can just explain to our viewers, how is this possible for someone to still be connected? How many kilometers do you sometimes go down when the mine?
I think the deepest mine in the world at the moment is in South Africa. I think it's close to 5,000 meters at the moment. The mines where we provide connectivity and that actual depth doesn't really make a difference. I think the important thing is the world in which we're deploying this connectivity is certainly it's in a well-managed environment. The miners put a lot of emphasis into developing these travelways so that they're well strutted, so that they're safe for people to use. We spoke about that. But essentially, we would use a combination of optic fiber cable, to be able to connect the surface network to the underground network. From the underground network, as we branch out through the veins of the mine, where the majority of the activity takes place, we worked with Nokia to deploy what was previously quite an old technology. There's a technology called leaky feeder. I think it was first deployed in the 80s as a low-frequency medium to be able to operate two-way radios.
Okay.
Nokia saw the opportunity to be able to redeploy, upcycle, if you'd like, this technology and to be able to utilize the leaky feeder cable along the travelways. I don't know if any of your listeners have actually been underground, but the environment is not.
I think you promised to take me to one.
And that promise I have forgotten. We are very close to being able to arrange a visit to the actual mine that I'm speaking about. But the travelways sometimes do undulate. They go up and down. They veer a little bit left and right. Traditionally, we would have provided connectivity using antennas, which unfortunately don't really bend very well. So you were always limited by the travelways and how they were developed. With leaky feeder cable, however, we're able to be able to run a cable very precisely along a travelway for up to 800 meters either side of a radio. So we can now get connectivity along about 1.6 kilometers. And this particular design had an uplink requirement. So the data throughput requirement was 10 megabits a second. And we're able to do that at a minimum over the entire length of it. Then there's there are the veins where many of the actual loading trucks would be able to transport ore from the mining areas, which are the faces. That's the real heartbeat of the mining operation. Okay. And there with Nokia, we use a distributed antenna solution, which even though the mine can have lots of pillars between the radio and the actual mining face, we're still able to get signal to that area, and it enables automation use cases. Gary mentioned automation. It's very exciting that our customer in Zimbabwe is an incredibly tech curious, and they've got a very well-defined digital transformation roadmap. We were there last week, and what they are looking to do is way beyond I've seen many other miners operating. I mean, they literally are leading the field when it comes to the adoption of technology and really unlocking the benefits which it can provide.
We have known Nokia to be a phone maker from the early days. Are you still involved in that in any way? And how has the company transformed over the years from being known as the biggest phone maker in the world to what you are right now?
Yeah. So it's a question I receive often, and we're no longer in the commercial handset business. So we do license the brand for another company to produce smartphones, but that purely is a licensing transaction from Nokia. We in Nokia now are really an innovation hub. Bell Labs, the world-famous research arm, is part of our organization. We are present in most areas of the biggest networks in the world, from fixed, from optical, from IP, through to wireless, LTE and 5G technologies. Nokia is one of the leading OEMs that are developing and manufacturing and delivering those solutions. And here's something really neat to share with you. What you will see soon is a wireless network on the moon.
Okay.
So Nokia is working with NASA to develop and deploy. Now, I need to be careful where it's 4 or 5G, so let me put that little caveat in there. But Nokia with NASA is developing a wireless network that NASA will use, and it will be permanently on the moon.
To communicate with aliens?
Who knows who's out there? But that shows the innovation side of Nokia. We talked about drones earlier.
Yes.
We talked about applications. We are that innovation arm, especially in the enterprise side.
Awesome. I know we are pressed for time. Maybe just lastly to you, Gary, just taking the cue from Anton, you mentioned about Zimbabwe, just to understand, like, as Sedna and Nokia, what plans do you have as two companies to connect African minds?
So we're really accelerating an organization as nimble and as active and as well respected as Sedna in the mining segment in South Africa and outside South Africa is extremely valuable to our organization, like Nokia. Having local organizations networking locally is so much more benefit than trying to attack that market as one of the main corporate OEMs in the solution space. So we value our partnerships. We value our partnership with Sedna beyond anything. We work together on business development, but it's really important that I share, for business development activities, Sedna has the full backing of Nokia, so they're able to design, produce offers and solutions for clients because they've invested in their people, in familiarization with our equipment, in certification on our solutions. They can work independent, and they do work independent of us. So we don't need to attend every meeting together. They are fully skilled and with the full approval of Nokia to position our solutions in Sedna's own name.
Okay.
What is great for end customers is when they see a huge corporate organization with the responsibilities that Nokia has, sitting behind them and joining them when needed. So if Anton was to ring and ask me to join him, I was with him last week on a client visit. And equally, Anton's and his team are fully capable of carrying out those type of activities, knowing if needed, we're there, but they're fully qualified to carry them out on their own. Something that really exciting we're bringing, and Sedna can bring this to customers in Africa. I mentioned more than connectivity.
Yeah.
We're bringing edge compute into the mine.
Okay.
We're bringing digital twinning technology into the mine. Nokia has deployed edge compute in Africa from Nokia and all of the applications that can enable. And we are very hopeful that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think you're maybe going to be one of the first organizations to bring digital twinning technology into mining in Africa. So
okay.
I'll tell you much more about that at the moment, but it's a really, really exciting development. This is more than connectivity. This is what you actually do with that connectivity. And Anton and Sedna are, in my opinion, trailblazing in Africa, that introduction and deployment.
And what would be the benefits of digital twinning within a mining environment?
So, as an example, what we can do with a customer, we can actually look at bringing the network capability, obviously is all the way to the edge, but we're then able to take information from that edge device and interrogate what type of service it's getting, where it's been, what the performance of the network has been for it. Great for any sort of troubleshooting, great for performance enhancement. And we can actually do it in a safe, controlled way by taking the visual and actual imagery of that mine area and bring it into a nice controlled area to actually improve it. So it's one use case for that, and the use cases will continue growing.
Awesome. Anton, you want to add something on your growth plans for Africa? You said 9.
Okay. I think one of the very exciting use cases which Gary hasn't touched on is the Nokia drone solution.
Okay.
Which presents an opportunity for us to be able to deploy drones which can operate autonomously essentially on predefined flight plans. If you can imagine a drone doing a perimeter search, and there are two key limitations with current drones. The first is your limitation on the distance to the drone. You're limited by that signal, whereas with a Nokia drone solution, you can deploy it over an entire network area. So you could be deploying it over 10, 20, 30 kilometers. And also this can be deployed beyond the visual line of sight, which is a key restriction at the moment. And we see productivity applications, we see security applications, and I think what's very exciting about working with a partner like Nokia is that they are bringing these real solutions to very important challenges which our customers face. So it's not about selling a product; it's about alleviating or tackling a business problem in the organization.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Anton. Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of ITWeb TV. For this and more, visit ITWeb TV. Thank you. This episode of ITWeb TV is brought to you in association with ITWeb Security Summit, the must-attend gathering of IT, security, and business decision makers. Visit itweb.co.za for more information.